Hello and welcome to Backyard Farmer. I'm Kim Todd. For the next hour, we will be answering those landscape and gardening questions. And as you know, we are not taking your phone calls just yet. You can still submit those questions and those pictures via email. The address is byf@unl.edu. Tell us where you live. You can also follow Backyard Farmer during the week on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Pinterest. So we're going to start with samples. And Jody, your sample is actually related to a question that one of our viewers sent
Well,
in.
then it's pretty timely because I've had some people send some pretty interesting asparagus spears to me. I've seen some of them grow up and over and curve down to the ground. And then I've seen, this one's the weirdest one I saw today, but I've seen weirder. And these are caused by an asparagus beetle. There are two different kinds of asparagus beetles. The one that I brought today is the common asparagus beetle. They're in this container here. But what it does is overwinter as adults. And so as soon as your asparagus comes out of the ground, so do the beetles. And they start laying eggs, and there's probably about 2 to 3 generations per year, so overlapping generations. What you can do is just scout early and often, pick those adult beetles off the plant. You can see them. They lay eggs on the spears and on the ferns, whatever they're called, in perfect straight lines. And there are a lot of predators, though, that will take care of those. There's a lot of wasps, there's mites, there's beetles, there's ants. So we really don't want to spray anything unless it's maybe a biorational, but that would be spinosad, and you would have to do that once a week. So if you can get out there and pick and eat and wash and get those eggs off and then pick those beetles off, you can enjoy your asparagus, and then you will know why there's some weird curly ones in the garden too.
But they're still edible.
Yep.
Yeah, just don't eat the black things.
Like fingers
A
coming
little
out.
extra protein.
Yeah, a little crunch, those little beetle wings, right? All right. Rock, that's pretty.
It actually is not bad. Kind of is pleasing to the eyes. But this is moss, and moss is something that people think, oh, I've got to control this. I've got to do something about that. And there are some moss control products on the market. They're generally iron-based. They're not a synthetic pesticide technically, and they can take the moss out. But generally, moss is an indication that there's something wrong with the site with drainage. You can get them in your lawn. You generally up underneath trees, you'll sometimes see it. And when we get into the heat of the summer, they're pretty well gone. So, if it's the shade of a tree, you probably shouldn't have turf there anyway. And you may want to put in some ornamentals that enjoy the shade, and that would help shade out the moss, and it wouldn't form. Or if you do actually have a drainage problem, you might consider something to change the slope or something as water acclimates. But once again, moss is not anything that's really hazardous. And if it's actually invading and taking over an area, then you've got a drainage, water, wet problem that you need to take care of rather than reaching for some sort of chemical control measure. So this is moss, and it's actually out of my yard right under the bush. I get it every year. It never spreads beyond the edge of a bush that Kim recommended, so I blame it on Kim.
I like moss, so there you go. I did that on purpose.
Yeah, but if you crumble this up and you throw it somewhere else where you think it's going to grow,
It won't.
It annoyingly won't grow for you.
No.
Because I'd love it up around my pond, but it won't grow there.
No. In our courtyard, the birds pick it out of the joints between the pavers. So
Well, good for the birds.
I know it. Yeah, they like it too.
That's organic control.
Totally. Or nesting material, or both. All right, Elizabeth, that is a really pathetic tomato.
It is a gorgeous tomato, and I brought it just so I could share with all the viewers at home because, oftentimes if we go to the garden center, we're going to see this tomato and we're going to discount it and we're not even going to select it. But sometimes when pickings are really slim, we can go ahead and we can use this tomato. Now the cool part about tomatoes is that they will go ahead and they will put roots on the stem of the plant. And so what we have are these different little white nubs that are on here. Those are going to turn into roots. And so with the tomato plant, what we can do is we can go ahead and sink this into the ground if we want to. It depends on how much tomato you want sticking out, but we could at least put, 12 inches, 10 inches in the ground. If we're gonna sink it down to about this part, we would go ahead and we'd strip all these leaves off. We'd wanna lay it in the ground, put the soil on top of it, and leave just this part peeking out. Now, it depends on your outlook on your tomatoes or not, whether or not you pick the blooms off when you plant them, or if you leave them on. I'm one of those that I go ahead and I pick them off because I want that tomato to go into rip production and go ahead and start leafing out and not put the energy into the fruit production. But even though it might look a little gangly, don't discount the ugly tomatoes because you can still save them as long as they're healthy and in good condition.
Excellent. Do you know what kind that is?
I think this one is aroma.
All right, there you go. A little paste in your future.
I hope so.
All right. All right, so let's start with pictures, and we have a lot of pictures tonight, which is thanks to our audience. Your very first one here is, this is an oak within 100 yards of the shelter belt. They spray for bagworms. Two oaks have these. They want to know what this particular thing is.
Okay, so I'm gonna just say that I kind of hate galls. There's a lot of galls in these samples. I think this one is noxious oak gall, but there is not a lot of information about that one. There are many type of gall-making insects, but I don't think it's related to the spraying from the bagworms. So.
All right, and not much you can do about this.
Yeah, and the thing with galls, this is why I don't like galls, because they don't look good. You don't see an insect. It's not cute. You can't fix it. You don't want to spray. It's not going to help. So.
All right. So since you love them so much, this is your next picture of an oak that has thousands of these on the tips of the branches, next to another one that just has a few. He does say that when he cuts these apart, they're hard. They feel like they might have been an acorn.
Yeah, that's a good clue that says it's the oak bullet gall. So we talked about this, I think, the other day or the other show, but it can't, like when there's a lot of them like this, it may stunt some of the growth. So if you can prune them out, that's what I would recommend if you can reach any of those. But again, there's no control for that.
All right. So, and we have seen a lot of these show up in the landscape lately. So this one is a Shadron viewer, Jody. This is a red leaf rose in the backyard. These particular plants don't look nearly as healthy as the others. They have yellow leaves, some dead branches, less foliage. He's wondering, is this also a gall or some kind of a fungus?
More galls. And so it looks like an insect would have come out of this. It's probably a wasp. They're called Synipid wasps. You would never even see them. They're really tiny, but just prune that out. And if that rose isn't looking too good, you may want to try something else.
Yeah. I know we have spiny rose gall that shows up a little bit later, but not yet.
I didn't even know there were so many galls. Leaf gall, gouty gall, horn gall.
In other words, we're going to keep you busy all season with just that one word. All right, Rock, you also have, this is weed night for you, unfortunately. Yeah, and turf, some turf. So this is a viewer who is just a great viewer, and they've been battling this particular one for a couple of years. They pull it, they spray it, it grows these tall spikes. So this is a picture from last year that, where the flowers were, and now the nettle-like seeds stick to their clothing. They're wondering what this is, and they're from Verdigris, by the way, so northeast corner of the state.
That's common motherwort. It's a mint, square stem, dead giveaway. It does have some herbal properties, and that's why you see it and it escapes and readily invades. But I think they want to control it, and it's going to take a fairly aggressive, they said they sprayed it with glyphosate, I believe, Kim.
Right.
And yeah, that's not going to work. So you're going to need to use something like a poison ivy killer that has triclopyr or a similar chemistry in it, and that should be able to take it out. It may take multiple applications because they have a very robust root system, and like many of them, it's very difficult to control. So be persistent, but I would stay away from the glyphosate-based products only because they're not as effective on motherwort as some of the more aggressive broadleaf herbicides.
All right, thank you, Rock. And your next one is a rural Hamilton County viewer who has, she says, too much of this one around her yard. So what's this one?
Well, it's really difficult without a flower. We use flower color and flower shape and thing. It could be one of the wild geraniums. It could be any number of those ones. Once again, similar to the previous viewer, They tend to have a little bit of a secondary growth, woody type growth in them. They're very difficult to control, and you need to use something more aggressive than a 2,4-D based product to get rid of them if you want to. Once again, glyphosate would not be effective here. If they want to propagate them, I'm not sure why they would, because they're extremely invasive. That's a whole other story, but getting rid of them, and you have to be very careful because they're often in a landscape bed and you don't want to get the product on other things. But if you topically apply with the glove of death that we recommend, or a paintbrush with a ready-to-use product, ready to go, that's available at most of your garden stores. Paint it on the leaves. Be patient because it's going to take multiple applications.
All right, and one more, and this is,
and
this one's growing in the flower garden this year. She's never had this before. She says it looks a little like strawberry leaves, but not exactly, way too pointed.
Yeah, they come to a point where they're not round enough, and later I think we have a mock strawberry, but this is definitely not a strawberry. But once again, it looks like a wild geranium type, and I'll use that generically, and we'd need to see a flower so suggest they wait till it flowers. But if they do want to get rid of it, once again, with 3 in a row here, we need to go with a more aggressive broadleaf herbicide rather than the real common over-the-counter one. So the poison ivy killer that Ortho makes, and I'm not specifically recommending Ortho with others, has a product called Triclopyr in it, and Triclopyr is a more aggressive broadleaf herbicide that gets those difficult to control ones, especially the ones that have secondary or woody growth. So that's what I'd go with.
All right, thank you, Rock. All right, Elizabeth, we have a really interesting can we save this tree question to begin with. This is south of Kearney. It was blown over and staked up a few years ago. The stake was taken off for mowing, and we can see the results. And I think we can see it here, and we might have a second picture that shows the base of this particular tree. Yeah, so they're wondering, can this tree be saved, or what do we recommend when a tree this big blows over, Elizabeth?
So last summer, Grand Island had 90-mile-an-hour winds, and a lot of places had a lot of wind. So we saw these trees flop over. Now, it makes a difference on whether or not the root system was ripped out at that point in time. So with this guy, we would restake him for a year, see if the root systems come back. Obviously, this one, the root system did not take. So anytime we see that heaving on one side, or we see that piling up on the other side, the thing to keep in mind with this tree is it's not going to straighten out on its own. So what you have currently is the best that it's going to be, and it's going to continue to get bigger and probably fall over. So if it was me, I would probably remove this tree and start over rather than having to deal with a headache down the road.
Right. Yeah, it's a unique specimen, but not one we want.
Correct.
All right. So then we have an interesting one here. This is a maple that's foaming at the trunk, not the mouth, I guess. But he's wondering, what the heck is this?
So there's lots of different things that can cause foaming on the tree. If we get a heavy rain, we'll see the water come down and it'll cause foaming at the bottom. We could see slime flux that'll cause that, or just good old pressure inside the tree causing that sap to bubble out. Nothing we can really do about it. Just really enjoy it, take some fun pictures of it, and remember the one time your tree foamed in your backyard.
Okay. and then we have a viewer who lives up between Norfolk and Stanton. She has a pin oak. She says it does look sick. She says don't rogue it out. It's 18 years old and it provides the shade. And we can see the tree itself, and then we can see this that almost looks like lightning strike.
Lightning strike, frost crack, those are my first thoughts when we take a look at the trunk like that and we have that really straight line down there. Now, if a tree doesn't leaf out by June, it's probably not going to. So you could leave that tree in as long as you want, but it's not going to provide that shade if it doesn't have leaves on it. So with that oak, I would probably consider removal. I'm not going to rogue it out. I'll consider removal of it if it doesn't leaf out, or if it leaves out sparsely, or some different things related to the pH of the soil and possibly iron chlorosis. So if that tree needs to be treated for iron chlorosis, you're kind of at an insult to injury with an already stressed tree. But eventually, if it doesn't snap out of it, you're probably going to have to remove it.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. Not what they wanted to hear, but that's what they got. When the weather finally warms up, we're going to see familiar signs of spring, including butterflies during the day, moths at night. That's one of the first clues as to the difference between those two, and here is Jody to tell us more.
Moths and butterflies belong to the insect order Lepidoptera. Lepidoptera means scale wings, and you may see those little scales come off if you touch a butterfly. It looks like dust or powder that may be on your hands. But if it's still a living creature, you can let it go and it will fly away. It'll be all right. Today, we're going to talk about the difference between moths and butterflies. Let's start with butterflies. So butterflies in general are daytime flyers. We call that diurnal. And we see them often really pretty, beautiful colors flying from flower to flower, collecting nectar from their straw-like or tube-like curled up proboscis. That mouth part allows them to suck up the liquid from those flowers. And when they land on those flowers, they often hold their wings together. And sometimes they open it to get the warmth from the sun. We also notice that they've got two antennae that are often skinny, and they have little clubs at the end. On the other hand, moths often have furrier, heavier bodies. They usually fly at night or they're nocturnal. So we often don't see them very much, and they don't need to be seen. So sometimes they are a dull brown or gray. But they also do come in many beautiful colors. When they land, they have their wings spread out, flat. And their antennae are usually really furry and feathery because at night, they rely on other senses from their antennae to locate a mate. They often don't have functioning mouth parts and don't feed as adults. So their main purpose is to mate, and they need those antennae to find them. There are some exceptions to every rule though. And so we do have daytime flying moths, and we do have moths that have skinny antennae. And we also have a group called skippers that have characteristics that are kind of butterfly-like and moth-like. We want to see butterflies and moths because some of them are really great pollinators. But we have to remember both of these organisms start off as caterpillars, and caterpillars need a host plant to survive and grow. So plant those flowers for your butterflies and your daytime flying moths, and plant a lot of host plants that you don't mind getting eaten. Give them a break, those little caterpillars, and enjoy the butterflies.
And unfortunately, we really haven't seen too many of either one of those because it's been so cold. Hopefully we'll get some warm weather like today, and we'll welcome them back pretty quickly, I assume, Jody.
Yeah.
They're out there somewhere.
Yeah, they're hiding somewhere.
They're hiding somewhere. All right, so time for you for questions again. This is a viewer who got permission to plant this tree in a park. This is here in Lincoln about 25 years ago. She's worried about the health of the tree, and she sent a couple pictures, and that's probably the one that made this land in your lap.
Oh yeah, that's bad. So this is a major problem for pines. This is Zimmerman pine moth, and so this is a pitch mass. So when the caterpillar that overwinters in there emerges and starts feeding, this is what comes out as its frass. Let's see. Yeah, so that's usually at the trunk of the tree. For older trees, it's going to be lower down. Treatment can be done, and it's all about timing again. It's usually April when the caterpillar is close feeding underneath there, and then August after the moth has emerged and then starts laying again. So I'm not sure about the rest of the tree wise, what it looks like on top, but it might be something to consider, like evaluating the tree. But that's what that is. And you'll probably never see the moths because they're a brown moth that camouflage with that tree. But yeah, Zimmerman pine moth.
Yeah, that's a telltale sign always too, isn't it? Yeah. All right, so now you have a what is this? And that's all they asked.
Okay, and it would have been nice to see the top of it, but I do know that it is a beetle larvae. So this, if it's still alive, will grow up to be a beetle. I thought it was a firefly, and then I consulted with Kyle Cook, the entomologist that is an expert in beetles, and he said that it could also be a netwind beetle, but it is a beetle larvae.
Of some sort.
Of some sort.
All right.
Yeah.
Probably a dead one, right?
Well, That's sad. Because if it's a firefly, then it would be a glowworm.
All right, so now you have also a, what are these?
Oh.
And how do I get rid of
Yes,
them?
so this is an eastern tent caterpillar, and
Yeah.
you will want to get rid of these because they've already eaten all those leaves there. So what you can do is like take a stick or something and go and break up that web, spin it around like cotton candy, and then put it in a bag or drown them. And that way you don't have to use any pesticide and you can get rid of all of them. They're caterpillars that feed together in this safe kind of silk. And they do feed pretty early so that, you know, if you get rid of those, the tree will have time to put new leaves on and be okay. But if you see any of those, you want to definitely pull those out.
And isn't there a fall generation that's a different one?
There's
I think so.
there's fall webworms
Yeah.
and there's mimosa webworms. So that's different times of the year. But this one's probably going to be more damaging because
Right.
Yeah, my father used to put them in the burn bin on the acreage.
Swirl
Because-
a stick
Just
and-
swirl it like cotton candy, like you
Cotton
say,
candy.
and drop the stick and everything, and just sit there and just grin because he goes, "I got rid of them."
well, if it makes you happy, but I just want everyone to be safe.
Especially in the urban environment.
Yes.
No burn bin.
She told me to set them all on fire. No, she didn't.
She didn't. I did.
Imagine that. All right, Rock, you actually have invaders in lawns. This first one is a Battle Creek viewer and sent us this picture. And what do we think? It's a little,
Lighter green.
Yeah.
You know, it could be Poa trivialis, but when I look closer, because we see these pictures in advance, when I look closer, I think this is actually just an off-type bluegrass because the viewer went on to say that it turns dark green in the summer. I think we have another picture coming up that is actually rough bluegrass. I don't think this is rough bluegrass because rough bluegrass will go off-color brown in the heat of the summer, and he says it gets darker green and blends. So we've got these genetic differences. Most of the bags of seed you buy are, 3 to 5 different bluegrasses, and the potential for one of them to be a little genetically different, especially with this gradual warm-up that we've had. It's just a little greener. In my yard, I had a repair, had some sod that I put in. Newer sod was darker green, and by late June, it's all uniformly the same color. So I think it's just an off-type, but I think our next picture is going to be something far worse.
okay, so
there we
here's
go.
the next one. Lighter colored, and this is Omaha. So is this a weed or a wild grass? It spreads a little more, spreads in patches.
It spreads in patches. This is rough bluegrass or rough-stalked bluegrass. Poa trivialis is a scientific name. It is in the same genus as Kentucky bluegrass. It sometimes is a seed contaminant, but birds also like to use the stolons as nesting material, so it gets spread that way as well. Once established, it will continue to creep. It loves wetter spots, it loves the shade, but you can find it in full sun. And unfortunately, at the end of the day, the only thing you can do is aggressively spray with a glyphosate-based product, and you want to spray 15 to 20% beyond the perimeter of what you physically see right now, because it's got these low-lying stolons. The trouble with this grass is when we get into the late summer, when we get into the really dog days of summer, it goes off color and brown. And if you've got a really aggressive blue, it may fill it in a little bit and make it not look so bad. But at the end of the day, if you really want to get rid of it, it'll eventually continue to creep because it is a creeper for a long period of time, and it will really discolor and kill that uniformity that most people are looking for in their lawn. Living with it is also a possibility, but I think the viewer obviously wanted us to describe something they could do with it.
All right, so this is a carny viewer. This patch of turf, or former turf, is about 3 feet square. A couple pictures here on this one, and they wonder what happened.
So, that actually looks like nimblewill, which may be a good thing, but, it's nimble within a cool season, either tall fescue or whatever. But if you looked if you remember from the first picture, there were these little holes that were about the size of a skunk's nose. And then when the sod is ripped back like this, non-uniformly and kind of messy, then we generally think of that skunks digging for either earthworms or grubs. At the same time, if it was a raccoon, this is the way we tell the difference between raccoon and skunk damage. The raccoons are more fastidious and they literally roll the sod back, and repair is relatively easy. You just flip it back over. But I'm going to flip it over to Jody and say whether there's anything they should do with the concerns, whether it's grubs or earthworms.
Well, if you can peel it back a little bit and see if there are any grubs under there. The white grubs now, mast chafers and Japanese beetles. If you've got more than like 10 in a square foot area, you may consider treating your turf, probably in June.
Good
The
answer.
thing is, though, is those grubs that decay underneath the soil or underneath the turf, the skunk's still going to smell it, and the damage is still going to continue. So even if they treat for grubs,
It could be earthworms too.
Yeah, the animals they have this amazing sense of hearing and vibrations, and they literally cock a robin does anyway, but I don't know about skunks but that looked like skunk damage to me. The little tiny holes followed by the more aggressive non-uniform damage implies skunk damage, and they're digging for something, and controlling it is probably not really going to do much. But it does look like in that first picture that was nimblewill, which is a warm season grass. It wasn't greened up yet, and it's interesting to me that they are selectively, or the grubs are selectively feeding on or present in the nimblewill. It's a whole lot of biology going on there that we don't have time to delve into. But thanks, Jody, for the help.
All right, Elizabeth, these are yours. This is actually a Grand Island viewer. Weeping Cherry, 2016. There was a crabapple there earlier that was killed with fire blight. So, of course, temps dropped terribly, and they think this tree also has fire blight. Is it fire blight, or is it just it's a Weeping Cherry in Grand Island?
unfortunately, it's the Weeping Cherry in Grand Island. They look good for a while, and then they start to decline. So fire blight goes after those trees in that Rosaceae family. So pears, hawthorns, crab apples, things like that. Cherry's not in that plant family. So, you know, that's where we're not going to see that fire blight in that species. Unfortunately, with the weeping cherry, when you lose those branches, sometimes you're going to get that advantageous growth out the side that's going to look like a wild hair, and it's no longer going to be in that weeping form. So if more than 1/3 of the tree is affected, you might consider removal of that tree.
All right, and this is actually a willow, a big one. This is a corkscrew willow. Grew it from a cutting and planted in May of 2014. It's got 3 trunks or more, and there's a big canker. Should they remove at least one, if not all, or what's going on here?
At least I would remove that trunk that has the canker. Where that canker is located at, it's creating a weak point on the upper surface. So you think about all the weight of that plant is on that outside edge of that trunk, and we get a lot more weight on there, and it's just gonna split open. If it's located close to a fence, like I think it is in the background, it's gonna fall onto something. So rather you remove it and figure out where it's going to fall rather than let Mother Nature take its course with that one.
And since it's a corkscrew willow, go ahead and take another cutting.
Take another cutting, start over. I have one that I started last year, so they're very short-lived. So don't expect willows to be a long-lived plant.
All right, and you have one final one. This is a very large established maple. The bricks are a mess. They were going to take out the bricks and the mulch and plant turf, but they did hear, perhaps, maybe from us, that getting rid of the mulch would not be a good idea. What would you suggest?
Well, it all depends on when the bricks and the mulch were put in. If they were put in at the same time as the tree, what you're probably going to notice is you're going to remove those bricks, remove that mulch, and all the tree's roots are going to be all up in that mulch. And so you're going to have a raised area there. If you take it off and there's no raised up area, you're still going to have shallow root system because maples are prone to having shallow root systems. And so with that instance, if you're able to leave the bricks there, go ahead and do that so you don't have to deal with that unevenness. In the future though, if you do decide to plant another tree, go ahead and leave the bricks off, and then you can go ahead and plant something other than turf underneath, because turf and trees don't get along, and more than likely you're not going to have a good stand of turf underneath there.
Especially turf and maple trees. All right. Well, you know, we are edging closer to planting our backyard farmer garden. It has still been too cold. There's some really colorful plants out there popping, and here's Terry James to show us more at the Backyard Farmer Garden.
This week in the Backyard Farmer Garden, it is finally spring, and it's finally going to stay warm. No more of those wet, cloudy, cool days. We're going to be able to bring out the plants in the greenhouse. We're going to be able to harden them off and hopefully start planting next week. if we don't get rained out. As we walk through our garden, we see lots of colors starting. Clematis is blooming. The poppies under the big oak tree are blooming. Major wheeler honeysuckles blooming up our trellis. So we can really see the signs of spring happening. And these blooms have really held on quite a bit because it has been so cool. So we're really excited about that. We've got a little bit of work to do in our donation garden to kind of get that prepped and ready. But that shouldn't be too big of a deal. But we're really excited to be able to start working in the garden and really get our season started. So stop by the Backyard Farmer Garden and check it out.
And right now, of course, it is time for lightning. Elizabeth, your first lightning of the season. You ready to win it?
Yep.
Okay, we'll see. We have a couple viewers who are saying their rhubarb continues to bolt. They cut out the tops, but it won't stop bolting. What's up with that?
That's just the time of year, and when it gets warmer, the rhubarb's going to continue to bolt.
All right. We also have 2 or 3 people who are still asking, is it edible if it's frozen?
If the leaves are frozen and it goes into the stalk and it's completely limp, no, it's not edible. And you wouldn't want to use it anyway because the quality is not going to be very good. If it didn't receive any frost and everything looks fine, then go ahead and eat it.
All right. We have a viewer who wants to know whether coffee grounds are good to use in the garden. And if so, can you just sprinkle them on the ground around the vegetables, or do you need to incorporate them?
So coffee grounds are something you can use in the garden. What they're going to do is they're going to take away some of the nitrogen. You can sprinkle it in and let it break down with time. It can make it a little bit more acidic, but you're looking at a lot over a long period of time.
Okay, we have a viewer who pruned their lilacs in the fall and they don't flower. Why not?
Flower buds are set following the blooming of that year. So if you're going to prune, you need to prune immediately after flowering.
Nice job. Excellent. Thoughtful answers.
There you go. Quality rock.
No, it's all about quantity, Elizabeth.
Okay, we'll see. It's still weeds.
It could be a lot, but no quality or quantity.
All right, your first one here. This is a Gibbon viewer who wants to know whether multiple applications of something like preen will control Palmer amaranth in the garden.
Yeah, multiple applications. Preen has a very short residual, so by multiple, we're talking a minimum of 3. It should do a reasonable job on Palmer amaranth as long as it's not one of the resistant biotypes.
All right. This is a viewer who wants to know how to control warm season grasses in the garden. Will a crabgrass work now and it's foxtail later that he's worried about?
So if it's crabgrass, sure, the pre-emergence works fine. Foxtail as well, and there are a number of products that are labeled for both turf and landscape, so you can blanket apply, or if you want to use something like preen, as we mentioned in the past, that'll work as well.
All right, this is a Bartley, Nebraska viewer who wants to know whether floating row covers will protect plants from drift.
Well, the foliage is above, no. That would be a no.
Okay. All right, what controls thistles on the edge of pasture as it hits the lawn?
You're going to want to use one of the more aggressive broadleaf herbicides, something that contains triclopyr.
All right, nice job. You ready, Jody?
Mm-hmm. Never mind.
You're always so
I get so distracted.
All right. This is a viewer who found a whole bunch of grubs in an organic soil in their garden. He wants to use something to make sure that they are all gone.
Pick them out, feed them to the birds.
All right. What is the proper insecticide to use for bagworms and when? We're still getting that question.
Okay, so I was out staring at some bagworms today. They have not hatched, and we don't have enough degree days yet. It's probably going to be the beginning of June, and you're going to want to use BTK for the caterpillars. So.
All right. We have a viewer who says he thinks he has queen wasps, paper wasps, and yellow jackets that are scouting. Can they be trapped, and if so, with what kind of a trap?
Okay, so yellow jackets can be trapped, and there are commercial ones. You can also make some. Right now, I'm not really sure what they would be feeding on because it's just the queen. I would just hit it with a fly swatter because they're scouting, looking for a place to go as soon as they start that little petiole.
All right. Does wood mulch attract termites?
This is the last one that I lost at.
Yes? or no?
It's not going to attract termites from off your property.
Right. There you go. That was a good answer. Nice job. Nobody gets the thing because we're not touching the thing.
We were not diverse. We all had 4.
Yay.
There you go.
We were
You're
diverse
being
in other ways.
collaborative.
Nicely done. Nicely
Collaborative.
done.
All right, Elizabeth, what do we have for flowers of the week, plants of the week?
So for the plants of the week, we have some really nice part shade to shade loving perennials. And with these, we have a wide range of colors. We're gonna start off with the blue one. So this is the Brunera, and most of the time we grow the Brunera for its leaves in the shady environment. There's one called Jack Frost that's got a little bit of a silver color to it to help lighten up those dark spots. But it's got this really super cool blue flower, almost reminds you of like a forget-me-not on that. But that one is kind of a different one. And then the rest of them that are all in here are all columbines. And so what we have a lot of times with columbines is they will continue to seed themselves readily. We've got Granny's Bonnet, which is a super fun little tiny one, and then the native one, which is kind of the red and orangish yellow one. Both of those are going to seed themselves readily. So be prepared. If you don't want them to seed, take those seed capsules off. If you want them to seed themselves, go ahead and leave them on. This dark purple one is one called Biedermeyer, and it's a fun one because it holds its flowers upright, and there's a lot of them, and it is potentially sterile. So you don't have to worry about the issue of it seeding itself. But all these are really nice, great part shade, shade-loving plants.
Excellent. Thank you, Elizabeth. All right. We have a couple of maples that have lower branches dying, full tree base. What is this stuff? This is Northern Gage County. Jody.
Yeah, and we've been seeing a lot of this on maple. So this is the oyster shell scale because they look like oysters. If you look really closely, what you want to do is treat this. But again, timing is everything. You want to get that crawler stage. So what you can do is put out double-sided tape or put some tape upside down on there, see when those little crawlers are on there, and then that's the time to treat. I would use horticultural oil, and just to try to get at all of those crawlers, you may want to take like a scrubby and try to get some of those layers off and prune out anything that you can that has a lot of that scale.
All right. And then we have a viewer that had these little white spots on their indoor plant, sprayed with neem oil, but they came back. What's
Okay.
that?
So those look like mealybugs, and that happens a lot with indoor plants. If you've got a lot of other indoor plants close by, they could be just passing it back and forth. So you want to kind of quarantine this one plant and treat it thoroughly. You can use horticultural oil, you can use insecticidal soap, just try to find all those places. And if that doesn't work, you can always, there are systemics for houseplants that you can use. I don't know, systemic houseplant insects, something like that. That might help.
All right. Okay, Rock, I'm sorry, but we have some more weeds. What are they? We have 2 or 3, I think, couple pictures here for this viewer. What's this?
Okay, the first one was buffalo burr in the front, and that's one you don't want to hand pull because it's got little stickies on it even at that point in time. And actually in the buffalo burr picture, in the background, there was a seedling yellow nutsedge, so I could identify 2 of those. Buffalo burr in the front, it's an annual Solanaceae, so you know it's fairly aggressive, but you want to get it right now. You don't want to let it get very much bigger. And right behind it, upper left-hand corner, there's a yellow nutsedge seedling going on there. And then in the next picture, the only one I could really get out of this picture, because we don't really have flowers, we have the appearance of some white flowers on the big one in the center, but down in the lower right-hand corner, there's some lamb's quarter. So,
Right.
Yeah, this was, I think some soil was brought in or something, and
Right.
this happens a lot. And, you know, generally mow them off, hand pull them. If it's a large area, consider mowing them off while you get ready to plant. And if you're really that concerned about them, I believe they had some other plants in there and they didn't use straight lines. So it's going to be an entertaining summer for these people with the transported soil that had a fair amount of weeds in it.
All right, and then Old Garden, partial sun, your third one. He thinks this is a weed. Is he right?
So I'm not really sure what this one is. I was guessing maybe creeping cinquefoil, but I'm not sure if that's correct. So, you know, we could call it a green elephino, but I'm not positive on that one. Flowers always help, right? The cinquefoil has yellow flowers. Some of the other ones that it might be have purple flowers and blue flowers. We really need to get a flower on them, and I'm giving away my weakness, but need a little more plant anatomy before we can definitively identify whether it's a weed or not.
All right, thank you. Elizabeth, tomato, wondering what happened with it. It was nice and green and healthy, started to lose its color, set on a tomato. What's going on with this one?
Based on the coloration on there, where it's kind of a yellowy color and a little bit of purple to it, I would say we've probably got a nutrient deficiency. Because it's already started to bloom, you can go ahead and use a well-rounded fertilizer on that to help get that nutrient deficiency out of there so it can go into better production.
All right, and then we have a rhubarb planted in 2019. It had freeze damage, it bolted, the stalks are hollow. This is Nemaha County.
Yep, when we see that rhubarb start to bolt, those flower stalks are going to be hollow. And so with rhubarb or a lot of our perennials, what we want to do is we leave them alone the first year. We want to try to leave them alone the second year, pick very lightly from them. And then the third year is when we want to start picking from them. So with this guy, I'd let it do its thing and leave it alone because it's very young and it got frosted, that it's going to need some extra time to go ahead and recharge that crown.
All right, and then we have viewers with peonies. They have these rolling leaves going on, no signs of insects. She did say they're beginning to come out of it. So what do we think here?
Yep, it's going to be one of the environmental conditions with that. There's not a lot of diseases that give that kind of symptomatic response to them. And so what we want to do is just go ahead and leave it. These guys came up, it got super hot, it got super cold. Now it's warming back up again. So just let them get used to spring in Nebraska for a little bit.
All right, thank you, Elizabeth. You know, one of the old standbys in the landscape are peonies. They're usually easy to care for. They deliver that pop of color early in the spring. Here's Scott Evans to talk about different selections of peonies you can try in your garden.
Peonies are one of the longest-lived perennials in the landscape. Some people have said that they can live between 75 and 100 years. But what peonies do is they help bridge the gap between spring and summer with flowers. And today I want to talk about 3 different types of peonies you could try for your landscape. The first peony is the fern leaf peony. It gets its name from the fern-like foliage, and it grows about 18 to 24 inches off the ground. It typically has a crimson red flower that can be either a single or a double blossom. Since it's short off the ground and it's one of our earlier flowering peonies, we want to put it in the front of the landscape so we can enjoy it. Don't be surprised if this plant goes dormant early August, which is very typical. And the next group of peonies I want to talk about are the herbaceous peonies. These are the plants that we both know and love. These have the traditional white, pink, red, sometimes coral or burgundy flowers, and they tend to be a tall plant. They can easily reach 36 inches tall and about 24 inches wide. Some of our older cultivars of peonies tend to flop when the flowers start to open. So one of the things that we can do is put a peony cage around the plant to give it the support it needs. A peony cage is a modified tomato cage, and once the plant isn't fully leafed out, you're not even going to notice the cage. Herbaceous peonies can flower at different times during the spring, anywhere from early spring to late spring. So what you can do is choose peonies that are going to flower at various times to extend the flowering period anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks. The last group of peonies that I want to talk about are called the intersectional peonies. These are the peonies that are a cross between the woody tree peony and the herbaceous peony. What this gives us is best of both worlds. The intersectional peony has strong, sturdy stems, so we don't have to worry about staking it. It is more disease resistant, so we're not going to see powdery mildew or verticillium wilt like we do on some of our herbaceous peonies. They typically grow to a 3x3 size, so they are a little bit larger, but one of the outstanding features of these plants is the color of their blooms. This is where we get the true yellow, the corals, the coppers, oranges, and even lavender. They're becoming more popular in the garden center, so you can actually check them out when next time you're there. So when you're at this garden center this spring, check out the peonies to see what type of plant might fit your landscape.
Those really beautiful blooms and that long life are reasons why you really should have a few peonies in your landscape, and most of them are actually also fragrant. All right, Jody, you have what is this, and what is this? The
Okay.
first being stink bugs.
Probably
How-
brown marmorated stink bugs.
Yeah, and she
right?
wants to know how to get rid of them.
Okay, so they came in the fall, so just you can sweep them up, keep them in that bag, and throw them out. And yeah,
That's
check again
it.
in the fall. Don't let them in.
Don't let them in. All right, then we have a viewer who has spots on the tulips and on other foliage. This is mostly tulips.
Okay.
They want to know what this is.
I don't think it's insect related. It's probably environmental because Nebraska.
Exactly. then we have this really fun little picture from a viewer in Beatrice. Found a tiny leaf with all these little eggs on it. Isn't that?
It's so cute. I just want that little canoe of eggs, and I want to rear it out to see what they are because I don't know what they are. I'm sorry.
All right. And then we have a viewer who sent in a bee on a pulmonaria, beautiful plant, and wants to know what the bee is.
Okay, so I'm lucky that I know a bee expert, and the bumblebee expert says it is the brown belted bee. I would not have known that because I don't see a belt on her, but that's the brown belted bumblebee.
Say that 3 times fast. All right. Thank you. That was very good. And you have a couple of weeds. I'm sorry, Rock. This is, I think, Omaha viewer wanting to know whether this is poison hemlock.
Yeah, it sure looks like poison hemlock to me. It could be Queen Anne's lace, but Queen Anne's lace has hairy stems and this one doesn't.
Right. I don't see the purple on it yet, but
No, there's no purple spots, and it's supposed to start from infancy, but that's the only thing that made me wonder about that one a little bit. Yep.
all righty. Then we have a couple of weeds that are a little bit less like that, and he thinks he's got mock strawberry, and I think the other, yeah, I think he thinks this is mock strawberry.
And
What
that is mock strawberry, and it looks like it's in the lawn and can be very difficult to control. Once again, I've been saying it a lot, aggressive broadleaf herbicides that contain triclopyr will take care of it. Multiple applications.
All right, and you have one more, and wonders what that is.
That's a Veronica or a speed whale, and with a flower on it, I could tell you whether it's the perennial or the annual type. I believe it to be the annual type, in which case it's a winter annual, and it'll be done here when we warm up.
All right, excellent. Nice job. Lots of weeds. I'll punish Bill next time he's on. He can have the weed questions. All right, Elizabeth, this is Evergreen set for you. This first one is, let's see, we're not sure where they are, but this is southwest corner of the house. Northeast part is dead, tree spikes and fertilizers, and they're wondering if that's not enough to keep this alive.
This is my least favorite plant ever, the dwarf Alberta spruce.
Yeah.
That side is always going to look that way because there's no new growth on there. So fertilizer spikes are not going to help. You could prune the dead out, but then you've got a giant hole. So it depends on if you can live with the tree in that condition or potentially look at a replacement for that spot.
All right, so your second one here is evergreen at the corner of the house. It's become too large, planted 9 years ago. They're wondering how they can prune this one.
Not very easily. The thing is that tree is going to continue to get taller. It's going to get about 40 foot tall, about 30 foot wide. At that point in time, it's going to eat your house. So, you know, there comes a point in time where you can try to prune it, especially where it's coming under the soffits, and try to get rid of it that way. But it's always going to continue to get bigger and wider, and so it's not a real good location for that type of a tree. If you had a really skinny one, it would do fairly well there, but the straight spruce species, the blue spruce, is going to get much larger, and your issue's going to continue.
All right, and your final one is blue spruce on a north-facing hill in Elkhorn, dead top. This appeared in mid-April. He says it's not spreading and wonders should he treat it.
At this point in time, you know, there's not a lot you're going to be able to do. That top is dead. I'd prune out the dead. Just keep in mind that tree's going to continue to get fatter. It's not going to get any whiter. There could be some insects going on. If you're seeing white pitch all up and down the trunk, that could be an indication. But at this point in time, the damage has already been done, so you're probably going to have to prune that top out.
Any evergreen with no needles is a dead branch.
Yep, the only hope is if you get new needles at the ends of the branches, and we're out of that stage right now, so it's
Too late.
too late.
All right. We have announcements of things going on in the gardening world, as always. And I think our first announcement is the May Museum's 21st Perennial Plant Sale this coming Saturday in Fremont with a rain date on the 17th. So that could be a fun one for anybody who can get there distantly. We have a competition going on, which is the biggest growers student gardening competition all summer, statewide competition. And that is actually through Extension, and our agronomy website is on the screen for people who really want to know how to register for it. A lot of fun. And our third one, of course, is Digging Deeper has started Thursdays at 8 following the show. So you get to watch us dig deeper, and that's going to be a lot of fun this year again.